you again. Today, for those who don't know me, my name's Gemma Gladstone and I'm a schema therapist and coach based here in Sydney, Australia. And today I want to talk about a really relevant topic when it comes to dating and relationships. And this is something that Justine and I have talked about on the podcast a number of times, but I wanted to do a quick episode today just to stress the importance of something really fundamental. And that is that we are our best selves in a relationship. We are our best selves in dating and making decisions when we have done enough work on ourselves to heal some of our schemas and some of our early unmet needs in life. And in particular, I'm talking about the abandonment schema. Now, you've probably heard us talk about the abandonment schema a number of times, but just to recap, the abandonment schema is one of these core schemas. It's a primary schema, and in fact, it's probably the first schema that anybody would actually develop in life, because even though they're normal and expected and everybody goes through it, we have little small abandonments very early in life, even being born, coming out of a nice warm place into a startling reality of the world after we're born. Even that is could be seen as a bit of an abandonment, even though hopefully we've got a lovely, nurturing, warm mother to cling on to as soon as we come out of the womb. That is still a little abandonment. And then depending on how lucky we are in life or what happens to us in life, we're going to experience other forms of abandonment, whether, again, a very normal abandonment might be you're the eldest child, you're firstborn, and then all of a sudden you see a sibling, a baby has come along, and that can be a form of abandonment. So those types of abandonments, basically, as long as our needs are met adequately enough everywhere else, those abandonments that we experience like that are probably not going to eventuate into a real abandonment schema. But abandonments that do eventuate into an abandonment schema would be things like having a parent that is unavailable. So perhaps the parent, through no fault of their own, was depressed, or they just weren't available for you. So there was a connection, and then the connection was severed. So an abandonment schema comes out of the severing of an existing connection or bond. And it occurs when that bond is broken and that experience of instability is felt. Inconsistency, instability, insecurity is felt. So that could be a parent leaving, that could be a parent dying. So we could talk about permanent loss. That could be parents splitting up. That could be a parent's inconsistent attention. So one minute they're very attuned to you, and then for a couple of days, maybe they're not attuned to you because they're dealing with something of their own, like an addiction or a mental health issue, or just very preoccupied with everything else. Now, it's always a matter of degree when we're talking about any schemas, and these very early schemas like the abandonment one. It's a matter of degree, and each individual is going to be different in terms of how impactful their environmental experience is going to be. So for a child with a highly sensitive temperament, children that just temperamentally feel things more deeply and have more depth to their emotional responses, they might be more likely to develop an abandonment schema. in conjunction with if they get the right amount of environmental input. So certain needs are not met, or there's inconsistency, or mum went into hospital because she was ill and you were separated from her for any length of time. There could be all these sorts of things. So with schemas and determining whether you have one, it's very personal. There are a lot of individual differences at play. So it's just about recognizing if you have this schema and to what degree. And if you need help with that, then obviously seeing somebody like a schema therapist to help you work through that and to help you assess that. But we've talked enough about this schema on the podcast for you to probably figure out whether you have an abandonment schema. And so if you do have an abandonment schema, or perhaps you've had a very strong abandonment schema and you've been working on it for a period of time, working on your own healing, maybe you've had professional help to work on this schema, then you would know that this schema can play havoc when it comes to relationships, particularly romantic relationships. And that's why it's very important that if we want to have a healthy relationship, either with the current partner that we have, or if we want to set ourselves up in the best way possible to find a healthy and secure partner, then we have to do some work at that kind of core level, which is our abandonment schema. So because I've had clients recently ask me, what actually is the risk of having an abandonment schema and not working on it? The risk is that when we meet someone, we're trying to form an attachment, maybe you're looking for a partner, the risk is that if you have an unchecked or unexplored, unhealed abandonment schema, then that schema is going to be running the show. So think about it, that we think about the abandonment schema, think about a part of yourself. Think about a part of yourself, a child part or an infant part, who holds the unmet needs related to the schema, okay? So the problem is that if you don't heal or work on healing your schema or have any insight at all into that schema, that part of you, that abandoned child part, is going to be in the front and making decisions and influencing your decisions and reactions and emotions when it comes to partner selection, dating and relationships, big time, okay? You can't escape it, because when we form a relationship or an intimate relationship, that connection is the closest thing that mirrors the early child-parent bonds that we had. So our love template develops very early in life, and this gets imprinted on us, and that's a really simple kind of way of thinking about it, and it will then direct our decisions and our choices and our reactions. And so if you have an abandonment schema, particularly a significant abandonment schema, you might find that abandoned part of you is making some important decisions that it really shouldn't, such as how long to stay in a relationship. Because if the relationship is not good, one of the risks is that abandonment schema, or that abandoned part of you, is going to be making decisions that are not actually in your best interests. So because people with big abandonment schemas can find it very difficult to leave relationships, to initiate the end of a relationship, even when that relationship is not good. It's the abandonment schema that kind of keeps us hanging in there, because part of the story of the abandonment schema goes something like this. Maybe I'm with this emotionally depriving partner, or maybe my partner is on again, off again, or inconsistent, or hot and cold, or there's something insecure about this relationship. Now, my wise mind, my healthy mind, my adult rational mind might be saying, look, this is not a great relationship for you. Why don't you end it? Get out now and find somebody who's more available. But the abandoned part of you is actually saying something very different. And it's saying something like this: hang on a minute, I want to stay in this relationship. Maybe I'm not being good enough in this relationship. If I do X, Y, and Z, then maybe my partner will see me and love me more and give me more attention. Maybe I should hang in there because I don't want to miss out. What if this is the person and I'm just not being good enough and I have to be good enough and then they'll love me? So maybe if I stay long enough and I hope and I wish and I change myself and I bend myself into all different shapes to accommodate this person, then maybe they'll love me. Or maybe if I change somehow, maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe if I change somehow and be a different person, maybe then they'll love me, or maybe then they'll treat me better. So the abandoned child will find all sorts of reasons to stay in an unhealthy relationship. And another reason why it's hard to leave is because there is usually some degree of familiarity in that relationship. And familiarity makes us stay. And that's because our brain will always go to what is familiar over and above new experiences. So if we're in a relationship that mimics to some degree or is somehow reminiscent of an earlier relationship, not often in obvious ways, but maybe in more subtle ways, such as your caretaker when you were little might have been to some degree emotionally unavailable for any number of reasons, like I mentioned before, right? Perhaps they had an addiction, perhaps they had depression, or perhaps they did go away a lot, or perhaps they were neglectful. Sometimes they loved you and showered you with praise, but when you weren't the child they wanted, maybe they withdrew a bit. Or perhaps you had very big significant abandonments, like the death of a parent, the loss of a parent, or the separation of a parent through divorce or the like. So if you've had any experience of that kind of fractious or non-harmonious or inconsistent, insecure parental relationship, then your love template, which is embedded deeply within yourself, let's just say it's deeply embedded into your psyche, is actually looking for a partner that matches that. So you may have higher chemistry and higher attraction to people who are more likely to wound you in similar ways as you were wounded originally, such as a partner who is emotionally unavailable, hot and cold, inconsistent, and the like, that kind of thing. So because of that familiarity, our abandoned child says, oh, this is familiar. This is where I'm meant to be. I'll stay here. I'll hang in here, even though one part of you knows it's not great because this partner is not reachable. Maybe they're very emotionally depriving. They've got their own issues. They've got their own schemas. They can't be an available partner. So one part of you recognizes that and says, like the healthy adult part recognizes that and says, look, I've got to get out of this relationship. But the other part of you, the unhealed abandoned part or your abandonment schema, is actually saying, no, I've got to stay. I've got to hunker down. I've got to be in this relationship, because if I can get the love of this unavailable partner, then I'm going to feel better about myself. I'm going to feel more worthwhile. I'm going to feel more loved. I'm going to feel more lovable. And so that is the dilemma that we face when we have an unhealed, unchecked abandonment schema and we're looking for love. That schema may trip us up. Okay. And it's very important that we recognize that. Now, that's one way that our schema can trip us up. We might call that in schema therapy a very surrendering style, i.e., we are believing the message of the schema. Now, the message of the abandonment schema goes something like this. Basically, at the end of the day, I'm going to be alone. No one's really going to be around for me. I might have a partner, but ultimately they may choose somebody else better than me. All the relationships end anyway. What's the point, right? So our abandonment schema is on the lookout for abandonment, and it is very self-fulfilling, such as the example I just gave. We're more inclined to be in relationships with people who are likely to abandon us because of how we're coping with the schema. So in that example I gave, I'm talking about the surrendering style, for example. That's when, if you have a big abandonment schema and you get involved with people who can't be there for you, who are not available, can you see then your choice? Then you're falling into this sort of self-fulfilling prophecy. You are believing that you're not going to have anybody, believing that a partner won't be there for you, but you are not saying goodbye to an unavailable partner. You're staying in a relationship with an unavailable partner, and your choice of staying is going to, in the long run, create the very scenario, the very outcome that you don't want to happen. This is really important stuff. This is really why we need to be aware of our schemas, particularly these big core ones that show up early in life, and why we really want to try to heal them, try to shift them. Another way that our abandonment schema can trip us up in relationships is something that we might see all over the place. We may have done this ourselves. I know I certainly have in the past. And that is when you just avoid relationships altogether. So avoidance is another way that our abandonment schema can trip us up, because the abandonment part is saying relationships and connections are too scary. I don't want to know about it. I only want to get involved with someone if I know it's going to be permanent. It'll have these kinds of thoughts will be in your mind if you're someone who is an avoider. Or if you meet someone and it's starting to get a little bit serious and you're more prone to be more avoidant, generally speaking, then you might opt out of that and think, I don't want to risk getting hurt. It's all too painful. I'm not going to give this relationship a go. I'm out of there. And so that's how avoidance might play out if you have an abandonment schema. So there's a number of ways that our unhealed abandonment schema is going to unwittingly, unknowingly, not on purpose, but sabotage our chance of success when it comes to romantic relationships and dating. And there's another way, the third way, that the abandonment schema might trip us up is if we have what's called in schema therapy speak, an overcompensation style. So that is when we recognize our fears, the schema fears, that being the one with the abandonment schema is, I'm going to be alone, my partner will leave me in the end, they'll choose someone else, all that kind of stuff. So if you believe that, but your coping style is to fight against it, so is to overcompensate. And overcompensation or counterattack is when we don't want the schema to be true, but we overdo it. And this can come out in behaviors that are very controlling, over-controlling, testing behaviors, pushing behaviors, things like, why were you home late the other night? Are you having an affair? And asking that question and pressurizing your partner, even though perhaps you've got absolutely no evidence that is true, or checking where your partner is, or checking up on your partner, or getting very angry. Now, the problem with this coping style is it can be quite dangerous in relationships, and at its very pointy end, it's actually the coping style that coercive controllers use. So not typically a coping style that most people use on the pointy end, but certainly I have had clients and female clients who have been overcompensators. They haven't been extreme. They're not out there stalking or aggressively over-controlling their partner, but they are engaging in testing behaviors such as questioning and being a little bit controlling and not trusting, kind of thing. And that too is counterproductive, because if you do a lot of that, you could very much work towards creating the very scenario you don't want, which is your partner leaving because they're fed up with you asking them every 2 minutes who you've been talking to, and checking their phone or things like that. So this schema plays a lot of havoc if we don't heal it, if we don't recognize it. Now, The abandonment schema, as I've mentioned, is a core schema. And the thing with schemas is that they can lay dormant for years, such as if you just keep avoiding people and avoiding relationships and avoiding intimate connections, then it's very likely that your abandonment schema will maybe never be triggered, really. You could potentially do that, unless, of course, you meet friends and colleagues at work and become close to them. Your abandonment schema may play out in that context, but it's much more likely to play out in relationships, romantic relationships. And that's why people can actually avoid having their schema triggered for years. They just opt out of romantic relationships because it's just all too hard. But of course, this isn't the answer either, because particularly if you actually want a relationship and you want a life partner and you want to meet somebody, then of course, if your schema is saying to you, look, just avoid it, it's all too hard, it's all too painful, then you're not going to take the plunge. You're not going to get yourself out there, are you? Because it's just too much of a painful experience. So the point I'm trying to make, obviously, here is that if we want to have healthy love connections, if we want to have a good relationship, if we want to date wisely and love wisely, we have to heal the parts of us who are suffering and holding all the beliefs of the abandonment schema. Now, there are various ways, of course, for those of you who are in therapy, or you may have been in therapy with a schema therapist, and you might have done some deep experiential work. So you might have done some, for example, imagery rescripting, right, which would be essential if you want to heal your abandonment schema to some degree. Some kind of emotional processing of that, all that material and those memories are really essential. So you might have done some of that work with a therapist, or you might be in therapy now, or you might be considering going to see a schema therapist. But there's also some things you can do on your own. And I've talked about reparenting yourself quite a bit on this podcast. And reparenting is when we're doing our own reparenting, self-reparenting. This is when we want to make contact. It's a bit like the inner child, right? We're making contact with the inner wounded parts of us who live within us in different ways and manifestations. And our wounded, abandoned child is, or if you have an abandoned schema, is a part of you. And it's really important that we don't self-abandon. Now, self-abandonment would be to say something like, this is all rubbish. I know I have crap relationships. I've got a long history of having shitty relationships, but it's got nothing to do with my abandonment schema, and I'm not going to look at it. That is akin to self-abandoning, because you are pretty much rejecting your own vulnerability. When we reject or deny our vulnerability and our emotional self, we also reject a part of us. We reject that abandoned inner child. So we don't want to do that. Instead, we want to recognize that triggered feelings of loss or abandonment or anxiety around, am I good enough? Will this person like me? All of that kind of stuff is all coming from, most likely, your abandoned inner child. In schema therapy, we'll also call this vulnerable child mode or an abandoned child mode. It doesn't matter what you call it. We're talking about a representation of where our unmet needs are housed. So a representation of ourself, a part of ourself, a part of our personality, which is in touch with all the vulnerable feelings of the past. That is it in a nutshell. Now, what can you do? So we want to know, what can we do just to start getting in touch with that part? Now, if you're listening to this and you think, oh my goodness, I've got a major abandonment schema, then this stuff I'm going to suggest is not enough. You probably also have to go and see someone, a professional, and get support, one-on-one tailored support. These are some practical ways we can begin to reparent ourselves, is what I'm going to talk about next. So there's really many ways, but I'm just going to quickly talk about 3 ways we can start to think about our vulnerable child or our abandoned child mode. Now, basically, a very simple thing to do is to use a sort of a triggered feeling to access a memory or a visualization of your younger self. So a memory involving some degree of you feeling abandoned as a child. If you've got a whole bunch of memories, just go for a very simple one, maybe a lower level one in terms of intensity. Or maybe it's a photo of you. Maybe it's a photo of you as a child, and when you look at that photo, you feel a bit sorry for that child in the photo, or you feel a bit sad when you look at that photo. Then a good way, in a very simple way, is just to be a little bit creative and to close your eyes. If you're up to this, obviously, don't do anything that makes you uncomfortable. You are the best judge of what you can do. I'm just giving you some suggestions. But close your eyes and visualize this little child, either in the photo or from a memory. Remember, a low level, I'm not talking about big traumatic memories, don't go there. You need expert help if you're dealing with those. I'm just talking about a memory such as you could be in the playground sitting alone feeling a bit like a bit of an outsider, or any other memory. Maybe you're alone at home and you feel sad, whatever the memory is, or maybe it's just an image, or maybe it's just a photo, an image of you in the photo. Close your eyes and just get a sense of the connection between you, the adult, your adult self, right? Remember, we have many parts of self. So get a feeling of your adult self connecting with this little vulnerable image of yourself. And when I say connecting, I just mean feel your way, notice what you feel like doing. So, for example, you might see this little, say, 7-year-old that you can remember. A school photo was taken and you looked a bit sad, and whatever, maybe you can't remember why, it doesn't matter. But just get that image and close your eyes and imagine yourself going up to this little 7-year-old you and just gently getting down to their level, or giving them a gentle little hug, or seeing if they want to sit on your lap and imagine giving them a hug. And all you're doing is, the point of this is connection. Okay, the point of this is meeting a need that wasn't met originally. And the biggest need, the most obvious need we can do when we're reparenting is just simply connection. Connecting with that part and maybe giving some reparenting messages. And those kinds of messages would be just simply, I see you, or telling the child something that you know they need to hear, right? So if they're struggling making friends at that time, so let them know, look, it's going to be okay. I'm going to be here with you. You're not alone. I'm an adult now, right? You're going to be with me always. You're actually not in the playground anymore, and you're with me now. You live with me in my house. And so you can try to bring your vulnerable child part, right, into your adult life now. So it's like you're rescuing that part of you, right? Just very gently. Or maybe you're just sitting together in that playground. What I like to do with my clients is that I don't leave them, right? It's not that we duck in and go into a memory and we give the child a hug and then we're back out again. No, that's not good, right? We want to always take that vulnerable child that we meet in an image out of that place and into a safe place, whether that is a safe imagined place, such as a beautiful place in nature, or a place that doesn't exist anymore. Maybe it's grandma's house, sitting with grandma on the couch, having some cocoa or something. Or maybe it's your house where you live now as an adult in real time. So when we're doing reparenting, and if we connect with a sad child in a place that is contributing to their sadness, we don't want to just say, oh, I'm just popping in to give you a hug and now I'm off. We want to connect with that child and we want to bring them into us, into our hearts, into our minds. We want to give them a lot of validation, warmth, nurturing, just like if you're an adult talking to your own child. So that's number one. So just simple imagery exercises connecting with your vulnerable self, okay? Simple imagery exercises that you can do. You can also have, if you're looking at that photo and you think, oh, imagery, I'm not up to that, or maybe I don't want to do that on my own, that's fine. Just maybe have a step down from this would be just have a little photo, put it in a little frame and just have it somewhere. And so every time you look at that little photo of yourself, you can say, have some compassion for it. Look at it, give that little child a lot of compassion. So when you're looking at that, feel a lot of kindness and compassion towards the child in the photo. So that could be a sort of a step down approach if you don't want to do any of the imagery on your own. Now, the second thing that I want to let you know about is, and this is a very old tool, many therapists of different inclinations use it, and that's the simple tool of letter writing. Now, we can use letter writing when we are writing a letter from our adult healthy self, our healthy adult, to our vulnerable child. Okay. Now, what's the point of it again? The point of the letter is just for connection and validation. Sometimes it could be to correct old messages, like you were told that your place was not to speak up and no one was interested in your opinion, for example, but I'm telling you now that's a wrong message and you shouldn't have received that. So you could do some correcting if you wanted to in this letter, or you could simply just do a lower level letter where you're just writing, dear little me. So I'd be writing, dear Gemma, I just want to let you know X, Y, and Z. So it's a letter where you are noticing and wanting to express the messages directly to that abandoned part. So you could speak to the abandonment schema. You could say things like, I know that when mum and dad had that big argument and dad left the family home for 6 months, I know how sad and painful that was for you. So you're witnessing their experience. You're mirroring back to them how they were feeling. Okay, you're communicating. You're having a dialogue with your vulnerable child. You're telling them that you get it. You understand. You know how painful it was. And then you could say, I know dad left for 6 months and I need you to know that this has nothing to do with you. I need you to know that you're a wonderful, beautiful little girl and him leaving for a period of time had nothing to do with you. Parents were going through a rough time and this is what happened as a consequence. So you could also do some correcting in the letter if you choose to. The whole point of a letter writing experience is just to recognize that you have another part, a vulnerable child, abandoned child part, and you want to spend 5, 10, 15 minutes, whatever, half an hour, sitting down in a free writing exercise, communicating to that part of you, recognizing that it exists and being very loving and compassionate towards it, and possibly giving that child some more up-to-date information. So that's the letter writing. Lots of different ways one can do it. I've just explained one way there for you. And really the third way that I like to tell people about is this compassionate responding to our feelings or to our embodied feelings. So coming back to the abandonment schema, say, for example, you, for whatever reason, a friend neglected to invite you somewhere or didn't call you on your birthday. And that was a trigger for you and you had some embodied kind of activation, right? You felt bad about it, sad about it. And maybe your abandonment schema was really triggered. So a simple thing to do, and this is a thing you can do right there in the moment, is to notice that you've been triggered, label it as an abandonment, label as an abandoned feeling, and go to wherever it is in your body. It's often held in the chest, but it could be held wherever. And respond to that embodied feeling as though it is a part of you. So you're linking the embodied feeling, the feeling of sadness or anxiety or just bereft feeling, or maybe it's grief. Usually it's any of those with the abandonment schema. And recognizing that embodied feeling is actually your abandoned child saying, hey, what about me? Hey, I'm here. I haven't gone anywhere. Can you help me? Can you give me some attention? So that feeling is a tap on your shoulder from your abandoned inner child, wanting some love, wanting some connection. It's all it is. It's not a catastrophic feeling. It's not a feeling that means you're going crazy. It's perfectly normal. So an approach where you think about your embodied feeling when you've been activated, so schema activation, particularly if your feeling is a little bit exaggerated than what you would expect, or you don't understand it, but all you know it's probably something to do with abandonment, then you respond to your embodied feeling as though you are responding to your own abandoned inner child. So you name that feeling. This is the abandonment schema. I have this schema. I feel right now I'm feeling really sad. Right now I'm really feeling a bit of grief here now. And you're just soothing it. So very important that you can go through the sequence where you can stop and think and say, okay, this is an abandoned feeling that I have now. Name it, label it, and then in your healthy adult mind, you're going to try to have a conversation to soothe it. Okay. And you speak to it as though it's a part of you. I know it's a little bit out there, but what we're doing is we want to speak to that feeling as though it is a part of us, right? It's as though it's your abandoned child. So you say things like, I see you. I know you're there. I recognize you. I'm sorry maybe that I haven't seen you before, or that I sometimes don't recognize you. I know you're there. I know what you're feeling. It makes sense. I get it. I'm here for you. You might say things like, you're not alone. I'm with you. So you are soothing that part of you from one part of your mind. One part of yourself is soothing another part of yourself. So you're having some form of like internal co-regulation where your healthy adult part is soothing your wounded child part, or the part of you that's been triggered by this, say like your abandoned child part, right? So that kind of exercise is just really simple. And so it's basically knowing and responding when you have an embodied feeling, label that feeling correctly, and responding to that feeling with a lot of compassion, a lot of care, a lot of reparenting, loving, warm, nurturing messages, and soothing it. Just by soothing that embodied feeling like that, many people can get a sort of a softening of that feeling, and that feeling may even just melt away. But if it doesn't, it's okay. Just remember that this is an approach to your feelings that is helpful, that does fall into the reparenting category. Okay. So there we have it. We've looked at the abandonment schema, and we've also looked at 3 ways that you can get into the habit of doing some reparenting for that abandoned part of you. And today I have also highlighted why it's so important that we want to recognize, if we do have an abandonment schema, we want to recognize that schema, and we want to label it, and we want to start to do some healing at the level of that abandoned child. Because if we don't, that part of us will keep popping up in our romantic relationships, particularly when we're dating and meeting new people. It's great at popping up there, and it will influence our judgments in the here and now in real time. Okay, so things that have happened in the past have laid down a love template that evolved for you when you were young, but is not particularly healthy now. Because it might be meaning that if you meet someone who is not good for you, you might stay too long in those kinds of relationships. And that's really what we're getting at. We want to do as much personal healing as we can. We can never heal ourselves 100%, and don't worry about that. But what we do want to avoid is having things that we don't know about ourselves. So we want to recognize what's going on as much as possible and make active steps towards labeling and identifying it and getting help with it. Because if we don't, these parts of us will show up in relationships, and we will very much be influenced by the story that those parts have. And so if we have an abandoned inner child, we know that we're going to be more prone to either avoid relationships because they're too painful, or we'll be more prone to stay in relationships that are not good for us, hanging in there, hoping we can get that person to love us and finally we'll feel good. And so I hope that's been helpful today. And let me know if it has. Send an email in. I'd love to hear from you. And also, I just want to make mention of, I am starting a new group program, a group coaching, online program, coaching for women. And the name of this program is Love Wisely. Now, this is a brand new program. And so I am starting off with a founding round. So a bit like a beta program, right? So this is when I take a small bunch of women through this 12-week program for the first time, and I get your input and reflections along the way. It's a bit of an active process. And so you can really contribute to the material. And I'd be very interested to hear people's feedback. So I'm going to be setting that up very soon if you're interested. So if you're a woman who has a pattern of unhealthy or just unsatisfactory relationships and you need some help doing things differently, and you want to look at some of these patterns, and you want to start unpacking some of these patterns in a healthy way with a small group of like-minded women, and it only will be a small group. I'll be taking a maximum of 8 women, and for the 12-week process. So it will be just the founding round, so the new founding round. If you're interested, just to find more information, there's no pressure. Just if you're interested to get more information about that program, there will be a link in the show notes, and click onto that, and then there'll be a form where you can just fill out your name and email and answer one question for me, and then you'll be on the list, and you will be able to hear when I put it out for people who would like to join. The benefit for you of being a member of this program in the founding round is that it's going to be about 50% off. So it'll be significantly reduced price, and it will be fun as well, even though it's a serious topic. And it would be great just to be part of this. So I'm really looking forward to that. And so if this is something that interests you, but you're not sure, just get on the list and you'll get some more information sent to you, and then you can make up your mind then. Okay, thank you. Thank you for staying with me. If you've stayed this long in the episode, much appreciated. I hope you take something away from today, and I wish you all the very best of luck. Until next time.